Hola, buenas noches, buenas tardes, good evening. Welcome to En Casa con la Plaza. My name is Abelardo de la Peña Jr. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications here at La Plaza de Cultura y Artes. Welcome you to our virtual programming. Since April of last year, we've been online bringing you the best of our community's history, art, and culture from our home to yours via these presentations, conversations, demonstrations, and performances. And tonight, a very special guest. If you're joining us on Zoom, use the chat feature and the Q&A feature. We take questions and we may answer those questions. If you've joined us on Facebook, please use the comment section. Same thing, ask questions, make comments. Let us know where you're viewing from. Share this with your friends. I'm sure they'll enjoy it as well. As you know, Cesar Chavez Day at La Plaza starts off our virtual programming, our live programming for the past several years. This year and last, however, we have not been able to have that momentous family day honoring Cesar Chavez and all his work at La Plaza. But this year we were able to honor him and farm workers virtually. First of all, with an En Casa session with Oscar Castillo, showing some of his fantastic photographs of Cesar Chavez in urban settings, doing his organizational work and meeting the people. There were fantastic photographs and some great stories behind them. Our education department did 2 En Familia con la Plaza sessions, including a culinary workshop this past Saturday and a book reading yesterday with tonight's guest. You can catch them all on our YouTube page at La Plaza LA and on our website after this session, of course. So with that, I'd like to introduce to you our host for this evening, our CEO at La Plaza de Cultura y Artes, John Echeveste. Please join us, John.
Thank you, Abelardo, and good evening, everybody. Great to see you tonight, and I hope you're having a nice warm evening. It's a very, very special night and a real honor for us tonight to have Paul with us, because, as you know, yesterday, of course, would have been his father's 94th birthday, which we commemorate as a major holiday around the country in many ways. Of course, there are many schools, buildings, other monuments named in honor of Cesar Chavez. Much has been said about the extraordinary life of Cesar in books and articles, documentaries, and of course, a feature film that was out several years ago. From very humble beginnings in Yuma, Arizona, he rose to champion the cause of the voiceless and the powerless in the fields, and committed his life as a champion and as a crusader for their rights. His work and his legacy have stood the test of time, and his words and his actions continue to inspire and motivate those who fight for the rights of the oppressed and marginalized in our society. Cesar Chavez was an ordinary man who did extraordinary things. An activist and organizer by day, he was a husband and a father by night who, with his wife Helen, raised 8 children. Today, his important work is carried out through the leadership of his son Paul, through the Cesar Chavez Foundation, and Paul serves as the chairman and president of that organization and has been with the organization now since 1991. The foundation operates a variety of social enterprises that support hundreds of thousands of Latino and other working families, inspiring and transforming communities from rural to urban throughout the Southwest and across generations. Based at the Chavez National Center in the Plaza, the foundation employs more than 600 people in 6 states. I'm happy to have had the opportunity to get to know Paul and his team in the work that they've done with us at La Plaza over the last few years. So happy to have Paul with us to learn more about growing up in the Chavez family and how he is carrying on the legacy of his father to this day. So Paul, bienvenidos, come on board. And there he is. Paul, welcome. How you doing?
Hi, John. Good afternoon. Hi, how are you? I'm happy to be here with you.
Great to see you. And you're coming to us from the center there, right?
Yeah, from the National Chavez Center here in outside of Bakersfield.
Great. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but you had a very special guest there yesterday that was all over the news, and just wanted to tell us what happened with that yesterday.
Well, you know, yesterday was my father's birthday. It would have been his 94th birthday, and you know, you'd mentioned in the opening that there's been many commemorations, street namings, and parks, and holidays, and Navy ships, and many other forms of commemorations. And as family members, we're very, you know, of course, we're gratified, but we also know that his legacy has to be more than putting his name on inanimate items. And so one of the things that we've done is we've asked people to honor his legacy by going out and being of action. We've been, you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has really affected the Latino community in a disproportionate way, and especially farm workers. We've at our 40 acres complex and outside of Delano, the movement's first home. For the, you know, during the pandemic, we've handed out thousands of emergency meals to farm workers, and we've distributed tens of thousands of masks and other PPE items to protect workers. And for the last month, we've been in partnership with the County of Kern and the Kern Medical Center and the Latino COVID-19 Task Force. We've put together vaccination programs at our 40 acres where we've vaccinated thousands of farm workers. And so the idea was to keep that work going because it's one of the biggest issues facing our community. And so we had planned to honor my father on his birthday by providing vaccines to farm workers in a place that has played an important role in our history. And we invited the White House to participate, and the First Lady responded. She said she wanted to come. And you know, one of the interesting things was that she made it very clear from the beginning that she didn't want it to be a publicity thing. She said that she wanted to go out and I want to help people. And so, you know, there was a short program. There wasn't a press conference. And then she went and she met with workers, farm worker women, and then she went in there and she did her part. So it was a good day. It was a good day. We were pleased that her and Governor Newsom and the first partner were able to join us and help us get some people vaccinated. And it was done in memory of my father's legacy. That's
great. And that I think was probably one of her first public appearances around the country too. Correct?
Yeah, yes. And definitely her first trip to California since becoming, you know, the First Lady of the United States.
Yeah, that's great. So you've been playing a role in helping farm workers with testing and vaccinations during this pandemic period too?
Yes. You know, the farm worker movement, which is comprised of organizations that were started by my father, principally the United Farm Workers of America, who is led by Teresa Romero, the first Latina immigrant president of a national union. And then there's the UFW Foundation, which is kind of the advocacy side of the UFW, led by Diana Tellefson, have done a lot of work, and we've joined them in providing vaccination clinics. I know that they've been done throughout the state. We've worked with Santa Clara County and Monterey County and Kern County and some work in Fresno County. So we're working with some of the counties where they have large numbers of farm workers. You know, we've worked with World Central Kitchen, the Jose Andres.
Jose Andres,
yeah. And we've provided thousands of meals to workers and the mask. You know, we have a network of radio stations, Radio Campesina and Forge, where we've gotten on the air and we've talked to people about the importance of getting vaccinated, not just for themselves, but for their families and co-workers in the community. And we've answered questions about the vaccine and help them understand that it's a good thing, it's not a bad thing. Answer questions about, well, what if I'm pregnant? What if this? What if that? And will it change my DNA? And things like, you know, what does the Catholic Church say? And so we've put together shows and PSAs, and we even got Los Tigres del Norte to get on the air and talk about the importance of being vaccinated. So it's been a multi approach campaign that has been successful. But you know, there's a lot of work to be done still.
Yeah. But do you see a change in attitudes there now among the community that of the importance to get tested and to get the
Yes.
vaccinations?
Yes, we have. You know, in the polling that we've done with farm workers, we're seeing that about 80% of farm workers are saying that given the chance and access and having access to the vaccine, they will take it. Now, it was down about 65% before the campaign started. But I think that there's been a lot of education, but also, you know, there's been a lot of damage done to our community during this time, and I think that people are seeing the importance of it. And then I think that when they see other people that have gotten it and see that you know that it works and that the impact is minimal, I think that they become, you know, a lot more willing and likely to go out and get vaccinated.
That's great. That's great. Let me ask you a political question. You don't mind getting political, do you?
No, I think we can handle it.
Okay, good. But you know, I mean, we know there's a major change in DC, you know, for the better for our community, right? Did the First Lady bring any new messages to you that give you some even more sense of hope?
Well, you know, she came out and there was, you know, there were a couple of messages. You know, one was just that that the president is committed to providing strong leadership on getting over this pandemic and making sure that there's a supply. And I think that her and Governor Newsom being there, talking about the importance to get out there and do the work, but also working with us, sent a strong message to the farm worker community. But the other thing is, she came out and, you know, she said in no uncertain terms that the president and the Biden administration are behind the Farmworker Workforce Modernization Act. It's the first immigration reform program for farm workers that has gotten through the House of Representatives in the past 30 years. You know, we even got 30 Republicans to sign on this time. On March 18th, it was passed. And so now we take it to the Senate, and it's going to be difficult, but she came and let us know that the president is squarely behind it and that he will use his efforts to get this thing passed. And so it was a message that brought a lot of enthusiasm to the crowd because it's one of the biggest issues that faces you know, all of us.
That's great. That's good to know. That's good to know. And her visit came on the heels of another important symbolic but significant activity that went on in the White House, and that was the installation of a bust of your father in the Oval Office of the White House. How did that come about?
Well, you know, this bust had graced the entry of the National Chavez Center here at the National Monument here in Keene, California. It was we began to get some informal inquiries about our willingness to lend it to the White House. On Tuesday, the day before the inauguration, the chief usher of the White House, they set up a meeting, and the chief usher of the White House Office of Protocol, I think it's called, formally asked to borrow the bust. Now, the interesting thing is that they asked for 4 years with an option for another 4 years. And so we said, yes, we hope it's another 4 years.
Okay.
But
that's an
you know,
incentive for you to help with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
right.
so we said, of course, we would be honored that it would be in the Oval Office. Now, we had no idea where it was going to be. And so there was a mad rush. We had to build a crate for it because it probably weighed 80 pounds. And then they set up overnight shipping, and we actually shipped it out of here around 5:30 at, you know, late in the afternoon. We got a text from the White House at 10:30 their time, like 7:30 here, saying it arrived at the White House. So that's all we knew. So, you know, on inauguration day, we were so excited about the change of administration, and so, you know, we were tuned in, and we knew that he was going to sign some executive orders, one dealing with Dreamers, right? And so we're excited, and I just wanted to see history being made when he took his seat at the Resolute desk there in the Oval Office. And I was there with my kids watching it, and they turned it, you know, the scene turned on, and lo and behold, there's my dad's image right behind
Oh, Wow.
And so, I was shocked because I didn't think it, I didn't know that its placement would be so prominent. And then, of course, we were excited on a couple of reasons. First of all, because as children, of course we're moved by these kind of commemorations. But if you see the photographs that
Yeah.
it's surrounded by, their family photos
Right.
of the president and his family. But the other thing that excited us, and it's even more important, was that to us he was sending a clear signal to farm workers and Latinos, people of color who have been under attack for the last 4 years. Right? It's been a nightmare for our community, and he sent a loud, clear message that a new day had dawned. And so we were excited about the symbolism of it, but then the fact that he sat there and he signed an executive order relating to dreamers and giving them the ability to continue the program, put icing on the cake. And so it's that kind of thing where you need to have, symbolism is important and you need to have it, but you also got to have, los hechos. And so we were very pleased, and we think that, that he really got off to a good start, and we're excited about the possibilities for this next 4 years.
Yeah, that's a great way to start the new administration. And I know when some of us saw that in the Oval Office, we thought, is that Cesar Chavez in there? How did he get in there? That's amazing. That's great, especially when you consider that the former resident of that office had Andrew Jackson on the wall. So it's quite
that was one of the interesting things was that there was a group of British civil servants that have this kind of group that they explore and investigate different issues. And so remember, Winston Churchill was also in there. And they took out the statue of Winston Churchill. And so they called because they're like, what? Winston Churchill? They wanted to know about, well, why Winston Churchill? And we said, our thing wasn't with Winston Churchill. It was more with Andrew Jackson, right? Who had a terrible, sordid history with Native Americans. And so, it was an interesting thing. But, one of the other things, John, there's a woman that works here, ex-farm worker who started a successful janitorial service. And I hadn't seen her for a while, and I bumped into her a couple of weeks ago, and I saw her, and she tells me, I was so excited to see the bus. She goes, I was at work, and my comadre started calling me, and se llama Alicia. Alicia, ahí está Cesar Chavez en la televisión, Alicia. And so when I saw her, she got real emotional. She said, I took care of your, she would do the janitorial work in the center. I took care of your father. I polished him and I dusted him off and I made sure he looked good for everybody. And now that he's in La Casa Blanca, me da tanto orgullo. So, so it represents, what I think it did was it validated that Latinos have made important contributions to the country, and that our concerns should be taken into consideration. And I think that from what we've seen is that it just didn't affect the farmer community. I think Latinos from all walks of life, from all stripes, felt a sense of pride because there was a validation, if not for ourselves, for our parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and people from the communities in which we live.
Yeah. And it says we're now present. We are present.
Right.
We have a voice here now, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of that, now you have, is it a granddaughter who's working in the White House as well?
Well, it's my niece.
Your niece, okay.
So yeah, it's my niece, Julie Rodriguez. Actually, we had a chance. She came out with the First Lady yesterday. She's handling I think it's I better be careful on the title, but intergovernmental affairs. And so she's the liaison between state and county officials. And so, yeah, thank you for helping. I was getting confused, but Julie actually worked with the Cesar Chavez Foundation for many years before she went to and began working with Ken Salazar in when he was Secretary of Interior, and then later went on with the Obama administration. But I tell people about Julie. As a young girl, she always impressed us. We'd be working and she'd come home from high school and she would get to work. What can I do? And she'd be active, and she was, wise beyond her years. And I can remember one time overhearing a couple of ladies working there saying, you should be nice to that little girl because I think we're all going to be working for her someday. So
Oh,
you know, from
yeah.
like from an early age, she displayed a lot of leadership skills and the ability to work hard and stay focused. And we're really proud of her. And you know,
That's great.
and I think that you know what she's been able to accomplish is that you know it's a beacon for all of us that you know that we all have a place, we all have a role to play in this society. You know,
Right.
I remember my dad talking about growing up and not having opportunities, and a big part of his work was fighting to give people opportunities. That you know that if their parents were farm workers, well maybe they wanted to become a doctor, maybe they wanted to be a lawyer, maybe they wanted to work in the White House. And so I think that when people see examples of things like that and other success stories with Latinos, then what it does is it provides role models, but more importantly, it gives people that kind of cease to put attitude that yes, we can do it, and yes, we do belong. And so
Yeah.
it's something that we're very excited about, and of course, we're very proud of her.
That's great. Great. Do you know too, did the president have much history with the farm workers? Was he at any of the marches or involved in any way? Do you know?
You know, I was, you know, during, I'm trying to think when it was. It was when he was vice president. I was driving to an event, a commemorative event down to the Coachella Valley. And I remember I was kind of driving, probably just on Highway 10, getting into Palm Desert or someplace. And my phone begins to ring, and it's a 202 number. I'm thinking like, oh. So I answered it, you know.
Thought it was a marketing call, right?
I'm sorry?
You thought it was a marketing call.
Or that's what I thought, right?
Yeah.
So I answered it, and it's hi Paul, this is Vice President Biden. How you doing, buddy? And I'm like, I didn't know him, right? And so well good. How are you, Mr. You know? And he says, listen, I'm just calling to let you know I'm thinking about your dad on his birthday. He meant a lot to me. And then he went on to say that as a young public defender, that he was always impressed by my father's service. And that was one of the reasons why he decided to be a public servant, but that he'd been inspired by his legacy. Yesterday, when the First Lady came out, she talked about my father's example and how it was meaningful for them. You know, her and the president are pretty devout Catholics.
Right.
And that you know they are committed to the social teachings of the church about being of service to others and the dignity of man and workers. And so that came through very clearly. And you know, so was my father. He started his career. His career was started by a Catholic priest that talked about the social teachings of the church and the honor of labor. And so I think that that's something that they share, that strong faith that helps them see the world in you know in the same light.
That's good. Good. I noticed, Paul, here that a longtime friend of the family has tuned in to join us, and that's Barbara Carrasco.
Oh, Barbara.
Yeah, good to have Barbara with us. Has a long history with the movement.
A long history, and then also some current history with both of us at La Plaza.
Yes, we'll get to that too. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about your father and his early life. Of course, he was born in Yuma in 1927. You weren't there, of course. I read that during his youth, he went to 65 different elementary schools, right?
About that, yes. Well, you know, remember back then, farm workers had been excluded from every type of major worker legislation. You know, they weren't covered by the National Labor Relations Act that gave workers the right to organize, but they were excluded from things like unemployment insurance, workers' compensation. And so, you know, agriculture is seasonal. So cuando se acaba la pizca, when the work is over, if you don't move and follow the crops, you don't eat. And so, so as a result, what they would do is that they would go and they would maybe pick peas here, and then they would end, and then they would move to the next town and pick walnuts, and it would end. And so, you know, can you imagine as a child trying to get an education and being uprooted every 2-3 months? And so, yeah, he went through a lot of different schools, and he only made it to the 8th grade.
Wow.
It was at the 8th grade that he stopped his formal education. Now, my dad was a self learner. He was a voracious reader. he always read, and so that's how he educated himself. But he dropped out of school not because he didn't want to pursue an education. He dropped out of school because he had to help my grandparents feed his brothers and
Sure.
sisters.
Yeah.
He was asked once, John, by a journalist, well, what is your ideology? What is it that keeps that fire burning, right? And I remember he looked at the reporter and he says, it's not anything real fancy. I'm just pissed off. I'm angry. I remember the look on my mother's face saying, Mijo, you can't go to school anymore. You need to help me feed your brothers and sisters. And he said, and I never wanted another mother or father to have that conversation with their kids. That's why I work hard. I'm pissed off. And it was that kind of, righteous anger that sustained him during difficult times.
I mean, being pissed off is a great motivator. That works. And unfortunately, that is still the case today too, with many of the workers, right? Right. And he joined the Navy and served in the Navy. Yeah,
there's people that think my dad is a Mexican citizen, right? My grandparents came from Chihuahua. The Mexican government had started this digital institute, Cesar Chavez for Spanish in North America, and we were talking about my dad, and I mentioned that statue that got to the White House. That my dad never visited. He was never invited to the White House in his life.
Is that right? Yeah,
that's right. So that statue's journey to the White House began in a hacienda in Chihuahua, where and his parents fled. My grandparents fled. They immigrated at the early part of the last century. They ended up in Yuma, where my tata Librado, my dad's father, homesteaded for a while, and then the Depression came, and they couldn't keep up with the taxes, and they lost it. And they hit the migrant stream, and they came to California. In 1947, my dad joined, 46, he joined the Navy, like all Chicanos do, right? We're patriots and we do our part. And the funny thing about it is that there would be so many reasons for him to be angry not to do that, yet he really believed in the greatness of this country and what it had to offer, and he didn't let that get in the way of his patriotism. So he joined the Navy, and he served in the South Pacific. Now, a real interesting thing happened during that time. He came home on leave, and he was dating my mom, and they went to the Delano Theater in Delano, right? And they had the audacity to sit in the center seats of the Delano Theater. Usher came and said, "This is reserved for Anglos. Mexicans, Filipinos, and Blacks sit on the sides or in the balcony." He's in uniform, and he's saying, "I'm not going to do that." How is this that I can go and serve my country and put my life on the line, yet you tell me I can't sit here? It wasn't fair to him, so he refused to move, and so he was arrested. And and the thing is that it just didn't happen to my dad. I can remember talking to people of my dad's generation, and time after time they talked about being thrown out of the show because they refused to sit on the sides or the balcony. And so it's important that people remember that kind of discrimination just didn't exist in the South and in Alabama and other places. It was here, and it was here in California. It was in the Central Valley. It was in Orange County. It was in San Fernando Valley, where they redlined districts and they wouldn't let Latinos buy homes. And so, so the fight was about wages, but it was more than that. It was a civil rights fight.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a question of dignity. And I know that Ed Roybal used to tell the story about the first time he took his wife-to-be Lucille out for a hamburger, and they were at a hamburger stand, and he was pulled over by the cops, and they just humiliated him for absolutely no reason. So that's happened here. Yeah, it's not just the South, right? But his first political awareness or political activism came, I think, in the 50s with the community service organization. Is that where he first got involved?
So my dad had left Delano, and he was working in San Jose, and there was a priest that was active, and he was doing work for farm workers, and my dad became interested, and as it turns out, this priest was part of this group called the Spanish Mission Band of Priests, and there were these 4 activist Irish priests and a Latino that convinced the Bishop of San Francisco Diocese to let them do ministry to farm workers. And so Father McDonald came to San Jose and he met, and he was working with Fred Ross, the organizer of CSO, came to San Jose and said, I'm looking for somebody to help me. And Father McDonald my dad had been helping him for about a year, said, I have the right guy for you. I want you to meet this guy named Cesar Chavez. And that's how he met Fred Ross. Now, an interesting story is that at the same time, one of these priests also went to, Father McCullough went to the Central Valley town of Stockton looking for indigenous leadership. And they said, do you know anybody? And they said, you should talk to this young woman named Dolores Huerta. And so it was the same group of priests that found, that find leadership, and Dolores had been active in her community, but it was there that my dad got involved with CSO. He became an organizer. Well, he was a volunteer. He led voter registration drives. He found this calling. He said that's where he learned to work with workers. He shortly thereafter he was hired as an organizer. He started 22 chapters of CSO up and down the state, all the way from Oakland down to Riverside, and points in between. And it was there that he met would-be Congressman Raval. They did big voter registration campaigns in East LA. Registered probably close to 500,000 Latinos in the state during that time. And that's when Ed Roybal was elected to the city council for the first time. I think it was at 52, I believe.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, right. But it really laid the foundation for the success that would come years later, and not taking credit away from anybody. But those pioneers of the CSO, went out there and they began doing that organizing work. So it was there that with CSO where he would become the national staff director for the organization, that he said he learned to organize workers. We lived in East LA before he went to Delano to organize the union. We lived off of Folsom and Fickett. The house is still there.
Wow.
We started school at Sheridan School. And then it was at that point that my dad decided to go to Delano and begin organizing the union. But he was by then my dad didn't have to work. He didn't have to worry about where the next paycheck was coming from. He didn't need to worry about having money to put food on the table. I see pictures of my dad back then. He looked like Clark Gable, Brooks brother. He really had Brooks Brothers suits and the tie, and little skinny mustache and hair slicked back, right? So he was well on his way to financial security, but he gave it up because he had this idea that somebody should go do something about farm workers.
So that was always his calling, right? He was never pulled in another direction, another career.
Well, I think that when he began to do that work, I think that he saw that it was calling. Now, it took some encouragement. My mother would tell us about how he would come home from organizing drives and he would say, man, I saw farm workers working out there under terrible conditions and the suppressive heat. Somebody should do something. And then he would come home from the next trip and somebody should do something. And my mom was a woman of few words, right? All those tough Mexicanas, right? And after a while, she says, well, why don't you do something about it? And then, he had 8 kids, young kids. Then, doing something about it meant that he would have to give up the best paying job he ever had. It meant that my mother would have to go back and work in the fields to support the family and to set out to try to do what people hadn't been able to do for 100 years before them. But it was at that point that a decision was made that he would try to do something about it.
That's great. And we have a photo of your family. Looks like half the family is here. There's only 4 kids. So
okay,
I don't know if you were the first 4 or the bottom 4.
I'm number. There's 8 of us, and so there's actually 6 of us there, right? So we're missing 2.
Oh, there's 6 of you, right?
I'm number 6 in the seniority list of 8.
So you must be the little guy there then, huh?
The guy, the chubby guy on the left-hand side.
On the left, okay.
Yeah.
Great. That's great. Good. So where was I going to go with that? I forgot. But I've talked. One of the things that's striking me as you're talking about this is you've got such great memories and great stories about your dad and his work. Did that come, some dads are quiet and they come home and they turn off. Others share what's going on. Did most of this come to you from observation or things that he shared with you, or were these conversations you had around the dinner table?
Well, my experience with my father changed throughout the years. When I was a child, he was the one that would get on us if we didn't do our chores or we got bad grades, right? But we also knew that something was different about him because, um, he didn't come to our baseball games. He didn't do birthdays because he was always busy. And when he was home, there was always people coming over for his attention. And so we learned at an early age that we were going to have to share him with other folks. And that's hard to understand when you're young, right? Now, as I got older, I began to see people coming in, and I could see how people were looking to him for inspiration and leadership. And then it changed even more when I began to work with him full time. And I saw the power of his message and his example. And I saw him in action. And at that point, he became more than my father. He became my hero. And so it was
That's
interesting
great.
because there was different stages.
Yeah.
There's lessons learned. I think about it, John, and I remember him always giving me consejos. And as a young kid, you know how like, yeah, you don't,
Right.
And
right.
now I wish I would have had, I wish I would have had my phone and I could have recorded him and taken notes. But the truth
Yeah.
be told is that as times get tough and it's time to make decisions, invariably those lessons that were learned through his direct consejos or through his example will come in and provide some direction and inspiration for the work that we do today.
Good. So you got involved yourself in the movement at what age? At a very early age yourself, then, right?
Well, it was we were always involved,
Yeah.
as kids. Now, when he first started, there wasn't any staff, and so I remember when he came to Delano, he went out and one of the first things they did was he had to leaflet, I don't know, 78 farmworker communities between Lamont and north of Stockton. And so I remember that he had an old mimeograph, and my mother, and I can remember my mother and my brother being there in the house smelling like that old mimeograph ink, and they would print
Yeah.
out reams and reams and reams, right? And
Yeah.
then once they had reams of leaflets that talked about the right of workers to organize and to join this association, then he would organize crews, and he would get my cousins and my brothers and sisters, and I was the youngest one that they let me tag along. And he would take us, and we would go. He would pick us up on school on Friday, and he'd drive us up in his Woody station wagon, and then he had it all organized. He would leave 2 here and give us leaflets, and I'll meet you 2 blocks down there, and he'd take another crew. And so we
Yeah.
went in and we leafleted, right?
Yeah.
And so it started like that. But then people came and began to help out. So there was a point that volunteers came, and there was other folks, and of course there's a lot more work being done, but this is all that we've ever done. Now, when I graduated from high school, at first I thought I wanted to be an attorney, and I was going to go out and earn a law degree and pass the bar and come back and help people. But it was interesting. I had a conversation with the union's general counsel, a bright attorney, brilliant attorney named Jerry Cohen. And I remember him asking me, "What are you going to do?" And I said, I told him I want to be an attorney. And he looks at me and he says, think about this. He says, attorneys are important, but we're hired guns. Why don't you go work with your dad? Understand how the organization works. Get involved on the political end, and then you can bring guys like in to help you out. And I remember I was shocked. I was like, "What?" In my eyes, that was the calling. And so I took it to heart. And I remember I went to my dad and I said, "Okay, Dad, I've decided that I'm going to work for the union." This is right out of high school. I was 17 years old. And so, reporting to duty. And I just figured that I'd be sent to a strike or a boycott. I would be in the action, right? And first thing he does, he goes and he puts me in the union's print shop. And I become a printer. But I also had the opportunity to meet great artists like Andy Cermeño and other folks that were doing a lot of the graphic work. for the
Mhm.
union. In our El Telegrafico, we printed a lot of those early posters, but that's how I got my start. I'm actually a printer by trade.
Wow, wow, wow. Well, you always got something to fall back on. That's good.
Well,
That's
you
good.
know, actually, that was his thinking. Because I asked him, I said, Dad, why did you, I went on to do many other things after that. I asked him, Dad, why did you put me in the print shop? And he says, mijo, because you were young and I didn't know if you had really decided what you wanted to do. I wanted you to have a skill so that if you decided to leave, you had a way to support yourself. That was the
Yeah.
practical side of it.
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah, yeah. But I mean, there was a real charisma to your dad, that attracted people in from all walks of life, from all over the country, who wanted to be part of what he was doing. Did you see that?
Yes, I
sense
did.
that?
I saw it. I could see it in people's eyes. It's amazing how many people I've talked to when they tell me about the first time they met my dad. Cesar Chavez, this great leader. And so they'd expected a guy 6'4" with a booming voice, right? That would shake the rafters and he would be eloquent to all hell. And what they found was a small, humble man, right?
Mm-hmm.
Indigenous features.
Yeah.
That didn't make great speeches, but talked from his heart. But as he talked, he talked about those hopes and aspirations and the anger and the indignity, and he spoke to the dignities that our community had suffered for many generations. And as he spoke, I think people saw their own fathers and their grandfathers and their tios and next door neighbors. And then the idea was that, well, if somebody like Cesar Chavez can stand up and make a difference, maybe we can help. Maybe we can do the same thing. And I think it was that, John. I think that's what drew him to people. He was like everybody else.
Yeah, he really had that knack to say things in a very articulate but simple way that people could relate to. Abelardo, if you could bring up that first quote that we have here, which, and when you consider that he did this with an 8th grade education, right, and so limited schooling, but we're saying things that were profound and continue to inspire people to this day, So I mean, and this I think says a lot about his philosophy and what he stood for.
Well, and he talks about the role of government and society, right?
Yeah.
That we have a moral obligation to be our brothers and sisters keepers. And and the thing about it is that there's plenty of political reference of that, but also he talked about lessons learned from his mother, my nana Juana, right?
Mm-hmm.
She would make dinner, and there was a lot of hungry people during the Depression. Mijo, go out, and if you see anybody looks hungry, bring them to the house para darles de comer.
Mm-hmm.
That's where he got his idea of being a service. Then it was formalized when he met Father McDonald, that talked about the social teachings of the church, and so it was an evolution, right? That came from his upbringing and from his faith, and then from his reading, right? And it made sense to him, and he found a way to put it to practice.
That's great. We have an image here too of him, of course, when Robert Kennedy came out. That was. Can you put some context into that when that was? Okay. I mean, this is certainly one of the most well-known images of your dad here.
So this was taken in 1968. So my dad began when he left LA, Boyle Heights, to go and start organizing the union. He had this idea that things had to be done differently. He had studied the past attempts to organize unions, and he saw that usually what happened was that people would go out on strike, and if the strike was broken up, then unions tended to fall apart. So his idea was that he was going to build an organization that had members and benefits, and then once they were strong, then they would go and take on the growers, right? And so that was the plan, and they were doing their work. And this started in 1962. Well, in 1965, Filipino workers went out on strike.
Mm-hmm.
And so it got to the point where we had to decide, do we join them or not? The growers had always used Filipino workers to break Mexican strikes and Mexicans to break Filipino strikes and so on. And so the whole issue came up. And so the NFWA went in and they decided to join their Filipino brothers, and they went on strike. So this was in the Filipinos went on strike on September 8th, 1965. On September 16th, the Mexican organization workers got together, and they must have been feeling really patriotic and ready to go because they decided to go out and strike unanimously. And so they joined their Filipino brothers and they went on strike. And, like most things, there's a lot of enthusiasm in the beginning. People went on strike and viva la huelga, viva la causa, and
Right.
and then, if you've ever been to the valley during the winter, the tule fog sets in and it's gray, and sometimes you won't see the sun for days, and workers had begun to lose houses, and other ones left because they needed to earn money for their kids, and all the while the growers were not responding at all, and they began to bring in people to break the strikes, and so morale was getting low. Now, at the beginning of the strike, one of the things that my dad had always preached was that we had to win this nonviolently. Well, after a couple of years, right, by the spring of 1968, there's a lot of people that were getting frustrated, right, and very angry. And when frustration sets in, people will do desperate things, and one of them is to turn to violence. And so there was talk about maybe we should go out there and burn some packing sheds and bust some heads, and maybe they'll listen to us, right? And when my dad heard that talk, he felt that he'd failed as a leader, because the principle all along had been that we want to earn their respect. We don't want them to sign contracts because they're afraid that we're going to hurt them physically. We want them to sign contracts because they look at us and they see us as human beings and they respect us, right? And it's a different fight, those two angles. And so what he did was he stopped eating for 25 days. It was his first public fast, and actually that's where we did the food distribution yesterday at the 40 acres in Delano. That's where the governor and the first lady toured the little room that he fasted for 25 days. But when it came time to break the fast, by then he had become pretty much of a national figure. And Bobby Kennedy came out from back east, and he was really the first prominent national politician to come out and support farm workers. And so that was the scene in Delano where my dad broke the fast. Bobby Kennedy is actually giving him la hostia. He's giving him the la hostia, the host, and that's what he broke his fast with. It was during this time too, in 1968, that people were urging Bobby Kennedy to run for president. He hadn't decided that, and the stories that we heard is that people urged him to run. Bob, the Kennedys are saints in our community, right?
Right.
And so he was urged by the crowd to run, Bobby, run. And the word that we have is that on his flight home to New York is when he decided that he would make his bid for the presidency.
Yeah. Ill-fated as it was. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, and 3 months later, he would be struck down by an assassin's bullet.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the thing about that image too, is that I think what that represents too, is it really cemented the bond between the Chicano Mexican-American community and the Democratic Party, that, we're on the same team here.
Right. Well, I remember after that, the union went all out for Bobby Kennedy. I remember my mother, she went and she walked precincts, and she talked about walking those precincts there in City Terrace, up and down, up and down.
Oh yeah,
but there was precincts that had 100% voter turnout, right? That had never happened before, and people turned out to support the Kennedys. But I tell people that there was a strong bond there, but the fact is they had only met a couple of times. They only met a couple of times, and the thing about it is, if you look at their lives, there was a lot of reasons why they would have nothing in common. One was born with a silver spoon, and the other with nothing.
Right.
One was Anglo, and the other one wasn't. Right. One lived in urban areas, and the other one lived in rural areas. One on the East Coast, but the thing is that despite those differences, I think that they shared this vision about fairness, and they both had compassion. And I
Right.
think it was that bond that drew them together.
Yeah, yeah. And to some extent too, do you think that was rooted in their shared Catholic values
Yeah,
too?
well, yes, that
Yeah.
too, yeah. Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
you can't, you know, I talk to my kids all the time because, you know, they can be critical of the church and rightly
Hmm.
so. But, you know, I always remind them that, you know, that they're, you know, faith has played such a big role in our movement. You know, we before every big convention we have a mass. Whenever we don't have marches, we have peregrinaciones, pilgrimages that talk about sacrifice, and La Virgen de Guadalupe is always in front, right? And so the thing is that we know that our faith has sustained us during difficult times, and it's played a role in our movement. And I got to believe that it was a bond that linked them together as well.
Yeah, that's great. We have one more quote from your dad that I really like that also says a lot about what he believed in.
Mhm.
You cannot uneducate the person who has learned to read. You cannot humiliate the person who feels pride. You cannot oppress the people who are not afraid anymore.
Yep.
You know?
You know, that speech was given in 1988 at the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco. And it was at a time that it was one of the few times that he talked about um, his legacy and the impact of his work. Um, you know, during the 80s, it was a difficult time. There was hostile administrations in DC, the Reagan administration. Jerry Brown had just left and Deugmajian had come in, and
Mhm.
a lot of the gains won were being pushed back, right? People looked at the Latinos and we were the sleeping giant, remember? The sleeping
Yep.
giant of the 80s?
Yep. Yep.
And so he used this speech to talk about his work, but also he talked about the future that he saw. And he talked about the role that Latinos would play, you know, socially and economically and politically, that we would take our place in society. And, you know, one of the other things he said in that speech was that politicians will come to us. He says that, you know, success will come when politicians come to us, not out of a sense of altruism, but out of political necessity, right? And so that meant that, yeah, it's good to have the altruism, right? But
Hmm.
it's also good to have power in numbers and have people wanting your votes. And so those words that he gave, you know, it starts off, you cannot, once social change begins, it cannot be reversed. What he was saying was that the tide has begun, and that, you know, when you educate people, you can educate them. You can't humiliate people that feel pride. You can't oppress them when they're not afraid anymore. And then he goes on to say, I've seen the future and the future is ours.
Yeah.
And so it really was a statement of optimism, a belief that you know, that while times are tough, we stick with this, uh, that time is on our side. And
Yeah.
it's pretty prophetic, you know.
That's great. And then coming around now, kind of full circle, in 2012, uh, President Obama
Right.
visited the headquarters there, the
Yeah.
UFW headquarters in
Mhm.
La Paz,
Mhm.
and declared it as the Cesar Chavez National Monument, which puts it on the same level as the Statue of Liberty.
Right. It's part of the national park system. You
Mhm.
know, the national parks system has the responsibility of protecting national treasures and telling America's history. You know, one of the interesting things that happened, there was legislation that was introduced by Supervisor Hilda Solis when she was a congresswoman, and Ken Salazar, the secretary. Well, he was a senator out of Colorado, and
Mhm.
they introduced legislation to have the national parks do a study to see how they could commemorate the life and work of the farm workers and my dad, right? And so one of the recommendations that came out of that was that there should be a national monument that could pay tribute to them. And so I remember it came up, and we had some conversations with Secretary. By then, Ken Salazar was Secretary of the Interior that oversees the national parks. And he calls me one Saturday and he says, you know, Paul, we finished up the resource study. The next step is to send it to Congress, and it's going to call for an establishment of a national park. But he says, you know, it's going to die there because of the gridlock. The Republicans were controlling the House. He says,
Yeah.
if I send it there, it's going to die. And I've talked to the president, and we both want to do something. And then he says, you know, we have this idea. The president said that he's willing to use his authority under the National Antiquities Act to establish a national monument, but it can only be done with federally owned property. And so at that point, he says, Paul, would you consider donating some land to the federal government? And the president has assured me that he'll do it. And so at that point, we were kind of caught in a quandary, right? Like, am I going to give them my dad's gravesite? You know, it was owned here in La Paz, owned by the movement, right?
Yeah.
And so I said, oh, I don't know about that, right? Because I don't trust the man. As my daughter said, Dad, you better not. Don't trust the man. That's just, But we sat down and we talked and we saw some of the work that they were doing at places like Manzanar, where they talked about the racism and the ongoing stuff that happened. So we were impressed, but we also understood that if we agreed to do something like that, that my father's history just wouldn't be the history of farm workers and Latinos, right? It would be part of the nation's history. And it was at a time that the anti-immigrant and anti-Latino sentiment was growing. And we thought that it might be a good way to let people know that we've been here for many years, that the border crossed us in many instances, and that we've been productive members of our societies. We've been patriotic, right? And that we should be respected and afforded the full guarantees of this country. And so at that point, we decided that it would be a good idea. But, my dad taught us how to negotiate. So we sat down and we negotiated to ensure that we had some participation. And so what we did was we ended up donating about a little bit less than 3 acres of land here at La Paz, which is our headquarters. We have 187 acres. And President Obama came out in 2012 and signed the proclamation that established it a national monument and set up the 387th unit of the National Park System.
That's great. Beautiful, beautiful place, beautiful place. And then to talk about the foundation, your dad founded what was then called the National Farmworkers Service Center in 1962 to provide basic services to farm workers like a credit union and a radio station and a gas station and other enterprises that they didn't necessarily have access to.
Well, remember when I mentioned that for 100 years before my father, every attempt had failed. And so my dad and Dolores and the other leaders, early leaders, they sat down and they did some planning, and they knew that things would have to be done differently if there was any hope for success. And so they did things like they made full use of our faith to be a central part in our work, much like the role that the African American churches played in the African American civil rights movement, right? We said that our faith should be a part of it. They also knew that they thought that they needed to build an organization before they went on strike, right? But one of the other things that they did, and I think it was really the genius of their thinking, was that they understood that the problems faced by farm workers weren't limited to the workplace. That yes, they received terrible pay, worked in terrible conditions, and had non-existent benefits. But they also remembered, right, because of their own experience, that when they went home at night, the problems didn't end in the fields. They would come home and they faced discrimination. They were kicked out of churches and they weren't allowed to buy houses, and they didn't have access to fair credit, and people were living in beat up, dilapidated housing that was overcrowded. Our kids were not being educated, and just a whole slew of social issues. So they knew that it would take more than a union. It would take a movement to address the needs of workers at the workplace and in the community, because at the end of the day, farm workers just aren't farm workers. They're parents and they're consumers, right? And they're members of societies that have shut them out and kept them out of the social and political affairs of their communities. And so that was their vision all along. And it was modeled after the trade union movement of the early century, when you had a lot of immigrants coming in from Eastern Europe, and they did things like settlement houses, and they started banking operations and did community cooperative housing. So it was the same approach, and my father lived by that concept. And actually, he was criticized. There was many people that said, "Oh, he's not a real labor leader. Look at him; he's doing this kind of stuff like affordable housing. He should be focusing on this." And he says, "No.
Yeah.
Because I grew up and I lived in a barn. I understand the importance and the dignity of giving people a good place to live, right? Oh, he spends too much time doing this. Oh, no. this is what our community needs. And so
Sure.
he followed that. And so that's what the National Farmworker Service Center was. It was to address the needs outside of the workplace. And we did things like they set up the first credit union in the history for farm workers. We developed retirement homes, the first retirement home for displaced Manong, elderly Filipino workers. We set up the Farmworker, the Rodrigo Terones health clinic that provided medical care to farm workers that was non-existent in Delano in the mid-60s. And there was the cooperative gas station that allowed people to come in and buy discounted gas and work with mechanics who work for the cooperative to help people fix their cars so they could go to work and provide for their families. And they organized farm workers and they struck, and they knew that if you did those things and in the community and did these things in the workplace, that after a while you would begin to lift people out of poverty, and
Right.
you would begin to give people faith and hope and give them a place in their society. And so the work that we do today is something that our founders established in the beginning of this movement.
Good, good. So tell us a little bit about the kind of work you're doing now, some of the things that you're involved with now through the foundation.
Well, we have 4 programs right now. We have our affordable housing program. It's our housing and economic development, and that's a project that we worked with you on. We have nearly 5,000 units of affordable housing from the Bay Area to the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. We're in San Antonio and Houston and Dallas and Austin, and we're in Albuquerque, and we're in Phoenix and El Mirage and Yuma, and we're in the San Gabriel Valley now, and we're in the Central Valley, and we provide housing for families and seniors, but that's affordable and decent, amenity-rich housing. But in addition to that, we have our Si Se Puede centers that go out and provide services to students, young people in our communities. The communities in which we do our housing are impoverished communities, and kids are going to schools that have not serviced their needs well. And so what we do is we're doing a lot of homework assistance programs where we'll go and we'll go look for Chicano kids that are going to college, and they'll come in and they will volunteer in their mentor, and they help them do their homework. And we don't say anything, but it's amazing. You see those little kids and they'll look at that tutor and they'll say, like, she looks like my sister. And then, if she's going to college, maybe I can go to college, right? In addition to the academic programs, we do enrichment programs. We take them to museums. I want them to see arts. We take them to national parks. We take them to the mountains to see snow, right? Because the thing is this then helps them understand that this world's a big place and there's many opportunities and there's a role for them in there. And so this is part of the inspiration that we look to do. Our mission is to inspire and transform communities. We transform communities by providing housing and doing those kind of concrete things. But we know that you also need to provide some inspiration. So we do programs for our youth, and we have senior programs that address issues of shut-in, and we have different programs where we work with them. Like during the pandemic, people were scared, and we had to be careful, and so our community service people became organizers, and we went out and we would bring in emergency food to our residents, and then when the vaccine became available, we started working to bring in COVID clinics to our places, or if not, we would work with cities to bring in buses and take the seniors to get vaccinated. And so the thing is that we do that because we know that we can transform communities. And so we do that. So we have that housing program. We also have an education fund that works on the academic achievement gap that exists in the community of color. In the past we've been after school tutors. We've contracted with, I don't know, probably close to 150 school districts where we go in and we provide after school tutoring, English language arts. We do mathematics. And the idea is that we're working with kids to kind of get them back up to grade level. We've developed programs where school districts where kids are falling behind, and sometimes they have an opportunity to maybe make up a little ground, but for sure not lose any ground during summer school with the summer loss. We've run summer schools for school districts where We have foundation staff that'll be teachers and cooks and bus drivers, because we're trying to improve people's lives. And so we do that work, and we recently adopted a new strategic plan, where in the next 10 years, we want to go out and impact the lives of 1 million people. And how are we going to do it? I don't know. But we do know that you need to set a high bar, and then you work like hell every day to get there. And so we brought in a new management team, new leadership under the direction of one of our new vice presidents for education. And we're developing programs that'll be rolled out pretty soon. But then also we have our communications fund, Radio Campesina. We have about 1.5 million daily listeners. We have radio stations up and down the Central Valley. We're on the Central Coast. We're all over Arizona, the Valley of the Sun. We most recently opened the station in Las Vegas. There's no farm workers there, but the work of the Cesar Chavez Foundation targets farm workers, Latinos, and working families. The UW is focused on farm workers, but we've looked at the demographic changes in the last 30 years. And we've seen that there's tremendous need in the larger Latino community, and we thought that the Chavez Foundation was a good vehicle to expand their breadth of the farm worker movement, and so we're doing that work, and so we have programming 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For many years in the Central Valley, when everybody was talking about Rush Limbaugh having the #1 radio show. The fact of the matter is that the leader in AM drive time was Pepe Escamilla with Despierta Ya Campesino, right? We had a 34 market share, and so we do programming that we entertain people, but once they're listening, then we provide information about what's happening and what they can do to get involved, right? And so we've done that. We've started a new network targeting the sons and daughters of immigrants, and this is music that I don't know, but it's music that my kids listen to, right? Hip hop and reggaeton, and the idea is we're talking to a whole new generation, and the idea is that the entertainment is a tool to get people to listen to us, to tune in, and then once they're tuning in, if we have Dolores Huerta on the air, that she's not speaking to 25 people, but that she's speaking to 250 people, 250,000 people, right? So we do that, and then the last program that we have is the National Chavez Center, and the National Chavez Center has the responsibility to protect and promote my father's legacy, and to look for ways to ensure that the legacy is relevant in today's world, like yesterday's event. The pandemic is on us, it's affecting us. And so part of the job is look for ways to use his legacy to impact the community. It was his birthday. We invited the White House and the governor's office to come out. It drew attention, it got media. It helped inform a lot of farm workers about what's going on. And so it's a good application of using my father's legacy to impact today's society.
I mean, that's great. You're working towards building the total person and the total community too,
exactly.
which is great. And just to show some of the projects that you've worked on, of course, La Plaza Village, where we got to work together, which is now been complete for a couple of years, includes 70 affordable apartment units there. And this was a partnership, of course, with the County of LA and Trammell Crow. And
20% of the units were affordable.
Affordable, correct.
Yep.
A new project that you're working on right now up the street from me here in El Monte. This is also affordable and supportive housing.
It's one of the things that we're especially proud of this is that, right now my father's getting a lot of attention, but the fact is that during his life, he was always uncomfortable with personal recognition because he knew that there were many people that had made tremendous sacrifices, and did it against tremendous odds, but whose names are lost to history. And so what we do is when we do our work, we make it a point to recognize people and to honor people that have made contributions, whose names are lost to history. We've named it after people like Fred Ross, who was my father's mentor, or Father Victor Salandini, the first priest that was arrested with my father. He was the famous tortilla priest, right? People like Pete Velasco, leader of the Filipino workers. In El Monte, we worked with the local Latino museum there, and we asked them to help us identify somebody here that would be good to be honored with the name. And we talked to them, and they came back, and they recommended that we name it after a U.S. soldier, Isabel Mac Ortiz. It was a young, I believe he was 18 years old, went to Korea, and he was missing in action. And it was probably 4 years ago, that his remains were identified through DNA testing, and his sister had fought for many years, and they brought him home and they gave him a decent burial. And so we thought that it would be the right thing to do to honor his legacy. And so we contacted his family, we asked permission, and they agreed. And so we're naming this project and a second component of it after Isabel Mac Ortiz. And the idea is that we want people to understand that Latinos have been here and we've done our part, right? We're productive, we contribute to society. And then we're also going to remind them that they have an obligation to us. They need to treat us fairly. They need to make sure that our kids have access to quality education. We got to make sure that immigrants have a path that can get their legal status and that can have a pathway to citizenship. And those are the kind of things that come when people remember about the contributions you make. And so that's one of the things that's
so important.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important too. Within La Plaza Village, you'll have your new LA office base.
Yes.
And we have a mural on that space that was designed by none other than our own wonderful Barbara Carrasco here. So
I think Barbara's tuned in. So Barbara, great work, Barbara.
Yep. So
one of the things that we talked about, and it would be nice to have her talk about the work, but if you see workers there and you can see the skyline, Los Angeles used to be the #1 agricultural county in the state, right? But it's changed, and it changed a while ago. But also Los Angeles has also played an important life in the role of the Farmworker movement. My dad learned to organize with workers when he was in East LA, but every time we had a problem, we would go to Los Angeles and ask our good friends from LA to give us a hand, whether it was boycotting grapes or lettuce or recall campaigns, and they always responded. So it shows that while there's a skyline there, that there is a strong connection to the Farmworker movement and my father.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, as always, great work by Barbara. So, Paul, I can't thank you enough. I mean, this is really enlightening. So great to hear about how you're carrying on your dad's legacy, which is so important. And you're doing great work. So hope we can work together again soon. We'll continue to work with the village and other projects too. Abelardo, I think do we have time for any questions?
Well, we do have a lot of people who tuned in that really appreciate your father, of course, but also the work that you're doing, Paul. We have Stephen Figueroa tuning in from Riverside, Rigoberto Rojas from Compton, David Olivera all the way from Seattle, Washington, and Martin Luther King Jr. County. When you were talking about the discrimination that was faced by your dad, David Olivera says, Jim Crow was alive and well in Kern County at the time.
Right.
And he also says that when John mentioned, and you both mentioned that your father never made it to the White House, that if Robert Kennedy had lived and had become president, he certainly would have been invited to the White House.
That's true.
We have Diana Encarnacion says, wow, I could sit with Paul for hours. A lot of people really thanking us for thanking you, Paul and John, for this really intimate conversation that maybe a lot of people didn't know a lot of the things that you've been sharing with us today. So thank you so much to everybody. Lydia G. Sanchez Bracmonte, Diana Encarnacion.
Lydia was my old high school buddy. We organized Unidos on campus in Tehachapi High. Hi, Lydia.
Wow.
All right. Roberto Garcia, who's a UFW alumni here from the North Coast office. He joined in. Diana Martinez, so many. Thank you so much to everybody that tuned in tonight. Thank you again, Paul and John, for joining us on En Casa con la Plaza. And the week's not over yet. We have one more going on this week. This Friday, somebody, I think you know, Paul, Dan Guerrero, who joins us every other week on Fridays. He'll be bringing his happy hour with the one and only Luis Valdez.
You know, before we say goodbye, I just want to congratulate John and Abelardo, yourself, for the good work that you've done with the Plaza. You know, many times art institutions can kind of be off on the side, and you've made it. You've shown everybody that art can play a central role in the lives of our community. And so I just want to congratulate you for the good work that you've done on making art accessible to everybody.
Mhm.
Congratulations.
Good. Thank you, Paul. We really appreciate that, and it's the art and it's the history that we bring to the community.
Yeah, and since for the past year we've been doing it virtually, we've had some incredible guests who've joined us, and all of you out there, if you came in late or if you'd like to see this session again, please, you could check it out on our YouTube channel at La Plaza LA, on our website lapca.org, and also on our Facebook page. If you've seen it on Facebook, we archive it there as well. Thanks so much to our sponsors, Kaiser Permanente and PepsiCo. And that does it for tonight. Thank you again. Que viva Cesar Chavez, que viva la raza, and nos vemos muy pronto.
Bye-bye. We'll see you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye, everybody.